Hi, everyone. First of all, let me thank you for choosing this high-level panel that is brought to you by the Egyptian Ministry of Water Resources and Irrigation and the International Water Management Institute. Honorable Minister, colleagues, partners, ladies and gentlemen, very, very happy to be with you here today to go through a very interesting session where we will be talking about innovation, different types of innovation, and we will be learning about experiences, which is very, very important. First of all, let me thank the government of Egypt, represented by the Ministry of Water, Resources and Irrigation, for the hospitality, for organizing the Cairo Water Week and also Africa Water Week, for having us in this amazing city, amazing venue, and amazing organization. So I am Dr. Youssef Brouzine. I am the regional representative of IMI, the International Water Management Institute in the Middle East and North Africa region, and I will be the moderator for this session. Ladies and gentlemen, water system is, as we know, is under unprecedented pressure from different factors. I will not go into the factors, we all know them: urban expansion, demographic growth, industrial development, climate change, etc. At IMI, we are leveraging on diverse scientific and technical expertise to understand the fragility of systems. So we work on systems thinking to understand the fragility, for example, of water, but in connection with other systems like land, agri-food, and other systems. And for us, the fragility concept is capturing the susceptibility of the system itself, like water system, to the pressure, to the shocks, which are part of our normal life currently. But the interesting aspect of fragility concept is that it is also capturing the capacity to cope with this stress and shocks, including the government capacity, the institutional capacities. And this double or hybrid way of looking at things is very important to capture the complexity of this concept. So the way to move from this situation is to build resilience. So we need solutions, we need innovations. And this is the core topic, the core concept of this session. We need financial innovations. So we need to have financial options to fund projects, investment solutions to build resilience. We need resilient business models that accommodate these solutions on the ground and to bring inclusive value to everyone. We need political innovations. We need more coherence across our strategies. We need institutional setups that accommodate the resilience work in our context. We need also technological innovations. In the era of artificial intelligence, very advanced modeling, calculation capacities, I think there are a lot of opportunities to leverage on innovation and technologies to help building resilience. We need also social innovation. We need more collective intelligence, social learnings. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm really happy to say that these are the 4 or 5, let's say, type of innovations that we will learn about today through or after listening to the distinguished panelists. I will definitely have a chance to introduce each of them, but first of all, let me call the Honorable Minister George Yango, the Chief Executive Officer from the National Wash Commission from Liberia, to deliver his opening remarks and presentation. Please, Your Honorable. So, Honorable Minister, George Yango is the Chief Executive Officer of the National Water Sanitation and Hygiene Commission in Liberia. So this commission is to regulate the performance of water sanitation and hygiene service delivery cycle. So Mr. Yango was instrumental in the formation of specific structure of the commission during the time he served in the capacity of Assistant Minister in the Ministry of Public Works. So during the time of service for 12 years as Assistant Minister, Liberia became the first Vice President of AMCO for West Africa. Mr. Yango served in a number of consultancies with UNICEF, USAID, Adam Smith International, etc. And Mr. Yango is a graduate of the Loughborough University of Technology with a Master of Science degree in Water and Environmental Management for low-income countries. Your Honorable, the floor is yours.
Thank you. I'd like to begin this presentation by being very grateful. I may well say this was a bit of an imposition. I know originally we were not a part of this the program, but we're happy to be able to give you a bit of information on our country. It's more in the form of telling you what the country is, what we do, what are some of the reflections for what we do, and then, of course, the sort of aspirations and the prospects we have to do a little better. So briefly, we're going to give you an analysis of the context of the country, the sector actors, I mean those who help to do water sanitation and hygiene in Liberia, and then of course some of the challenges we have, the opportunities, the programs and the projects that currently we are trying to undertake, and then of course what makes us to be able to go along with those projects. So Liberia is a small country on that lies on the west coast of Africa. I think this is history probably that most of you know. But that country has perhaps one of the highest rainfall in the world. It's like the opposite of Egypt or other countries that are water stressed. Our problem is that we have so much water, and the problem is how clean that water is for the citizens of Liberia. And if you look at the statistics we have, it shows that we're very low on access to water in terms of facilities and even quantities and quality of water that we provide our citizens. Liberia is very low. For basic services, we are at 76. For civilly managed, we are as low as 10%, and that is quite alarming. Of course, the issue of the proper use of those facilities is very, very low. So we are there, and of course, our aim is to continue to increase civilly managed services to the population of Liberia. So we have a number of players or actors. We have, for example, the commission from which I come that serves as the regulator. And because we do not have a water ministry, the commission also serves as the coordination arm of the sector in Liberia. We have, for the urban water, we have the Liberia Water and Sewer Corporation that provides water basically to only Monrovia, which is the capital city. But then other urban centers also, there are other small systems that are being, that supply water to our citizens, although the access is not as good as we expect. We also have a ministry called the Ministry of Public Works That ministry has a division called the National Rural Water Program. It means that all of the water supply issue does not fall under one agency. So we have a rural water supply. And then we have the Ministry of Lands, Mines, and Energy that regulates our water quantities through all Liberia. We also have the Environmental Protection Agency that generally talks about the sanity of the environment. We have challenges, and this is what we thought this forum would be very useful for us to be able to leverage some of the challenges we have. We have very limited investment. In terms of the private sector, is quite low. Most of the support to the sector in Liberia is from donor sources. And we know the issue of donor sources is that is dependent on the situation of the country. When the humanitarian crisis occur in many places, donors, we actually shift money to be able to solve those problems that affect human lives. We also have a low private participation in our sector. Coordination of the different units that form the basis for implementation is quite low. We have low we talk about low private sector participation. We also do not have the means by which we can be able to attract resources. We need some means by which we can be able to do that. And then, of course, funds that normally come to Liberia are already predetermined where they should go. Government has a very limited ability to ensure that those funds are equally distributed throughout where they are needed. Now we are developing a new program for 2024 to 2027. It's called the National Development Plan, which we hope to be able to deliberately influence in terms of getting more money into the sector. We have a new direction now. What we say in Liberia is that instead of having only on-site water systems, we also are advocating now, we are pushing hard to have systems, to have water systems instead of on-site systems. We also advocating to increase our sewage systems instead of having latrines, as many of our population have now as access to sanitation. We are involving more local government participation. We have a new act that is devolving the responsibility of central ministries to the level of local governments. We also devolving some of the responsibility of central ministries and agencies to local governments. There's opportunity for private participation. We are bringing on new programs that will require that these are under the support of private participation. We have increased political prioritization. Our national legislature is more involved now. There are two committees at the level of the national legislature that are pushing the agenda for the sector. So those are key opportunities that we have. We have current programs that are being supported by international partners. We are developing now a national action on climate change so that we'll be able to cope with the immense pressure that the climate brings on our infrastructure. We have a program called Scaling Up Nutrition in Liberia, and that is supported by the government of Liberia and other partners. We also are now trying to get the president of Liberia to sign up on a declaration of open defecation free, which means that we need to step up our game on gaining more access to sanitation. We're developing a tax now that will sustain the services of funding to the white sector in Liberia. We hope we can be able to legislate that and make it a continuous function instead of having it only on every government agenda. We are currently engaged in the development of the next generation of the GLASS report, which is funded mainly by UNICEF and the WHO. We are trying to equip our schools and our health facilities with sanitation, with means of sanitation to also be able to promote the issue of hygiene, menstrual hygiene practices. We want to aspire to an open defecation-free Liberia by 2027. We are keen on increasing our access to safely managed water systems so that we can be able to conform to the goals of the 6.1 of the SDGs. We would like to collaborate more with our neighbors. As you know, most of our energy, most of our water supply that goes to the capital Monrovia flows from Guinea. We want to have a more collaborative framework of working with Guinea such that the management of water resources that form or provide our electricity and our water supply can be sustained over the years as we go along. We want to begin to generate more money from domestic sources instead of depending on external sources for our water supply and sanitation access. We want to develop programs that will be more climate friendly or more climate resilient so that we will cope with other partners in the region and also on the international level. So those are basically what we thought to bring to the attention of this gathering, and we're very happy that you had the time to listen to our presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, your Honorable Minister, for your interesting presentation, interesting insights and reflection on the situation of Liberia. A very interesting example where rainfall is not a problem, but the country still need to face the water risks and climate risks. And I'm sure the audience enjoyed your clear vision, clear plan of developments, but also the list of opportunities for policy development, program developments, and also collaboration and cooperation. I noted with high interest how you value the cooperation, including with private sector, which is very important, and other stakeholders in the water system, and your interesting call for collaboration also with your neighbors. And this is very important in the resilience of water system. Thank you very much. I'm sure there will be questions from the audience at the end of the panel. So we will definitely learn more about your plan and your aspirations for the development of WASH resiliency in Liberia. But now we will go and we will listen to the presentation of Dr. Mark Smith, the Director General of the International Water Management Institute. So Dr. Smith was formerly UMI's Deputy Director General, Research for Development. So he is bringing more than 25 years of research and program management experience in water resources, agriculture, climate, and sustainability. Dr. Mark Smith was Director of Global Water Program at the International Union for Conservation of Nature, IUCN, where he led innovative multi-regional programs in Asia, Africa, and Latin America, addressing river basin management, transboundary cooperation, and water governance, climate change adaptation, and nature-based solutions. Dr. Mark Smith holds a PhD in ecology and resource management from the University of Edinburgh and a master's in climatology from University of Guelph. Dr. Mark Smith, please.
Great. Thank you, Yusuf, and good morning to everyone. Very pleased to be here with you in this session and to turn the conversation towards the key themes of innovation and a little bit of financing I'm going to talk about too. And so what I want to do with my few minutes is highlight some of the innovation from IMI's own work and our partnerships that strengthen components of resilience. So what I want to start with, though, is a framework for resilience. So what are the components of resilience? What do we need to be paying attention to if we're trying to provide innovation that will strengthen resilience? So this is a framework that I've used myself in my own work for many years now, and I find it quite a simple way of looking at what are the pieces that we need to bring together when we look at resilience. So there's 4 components here. Starting from the left and working inwards, you see it's a nested framework, but the first of those components is governance. Governance alongside participation. Participation is so key because it brings a capacity to self-organize. And self-organization, as I'm going to come to a little later, is so important for resilience, for ensuring that people can respond to shocks and stresses that they experience. The second layer of this framework is what I term information and learning. So this is about data and access to data, but also the skills to understand, use, and apply data in planning, in decision making, in responding to shocks and stresses. The third component is system diversity and connectivity. So connectivity across networks, the way that different things connect in landscapes, in basins, whether that's related to people or whether that's related to components of ecosystems. So connectivity across networks, so that if components of a system fail, there are alternatives, such as considering redundancy, so making sure that in the case of water that you have multiple storage options for water should one fail. The final component of this framework is infrastructure, technology, and management. And there's a lot packed into here, but this is where we find built infrastructure, so engineered infrastructure, dams, reservoirs, etc., but also natural infrastructure and ecosystems and the services that they provide relative to resilience and water and so on. So this is where nature-based solutions fit. Technologies such as water treatment, technologies that can reduce water use in agriculture, for example, fit in this part of this framework. But the key point, as I move into the remaining slides, is that to build resilience, we need to make progress across these components, across systems. So then what are innovations that can help us to do this? So first, starting with that point on the left-hand side, the component on the left-hand side of governance, I want to highlight the CGIAR Climate Governance Dashboard that we've developed at IMI. And this provides access to data, reliable data on climate hazards and vulnerabilities and future scenarios relating to climate. So it allows the users to explore climate adaptation and planning across dimensions of water, but also across dimensions of of different sectors. So it's a resource for evidence-based decision-making, so critical in governance. But alongside that, as we introduce this governance dashboard and the data that's embedded within it, there's another key link to governance. The dashboard ensures that all of the agencies that have to play a role in responding to floods, droughts, or different types of disasters, or in planning and preparing, planning for adaptation and so on, they have the same data. They have access to the same data. So with a common dashboard and transparency in information, this promotes coordinated action, but also better accountability across governments and ministries and different sectors and different levels that need to be engaged in how we manage water in ways that are help with resilience. So I'm going to come back in just a moment to the related point that I made earlier about participation and self-organizing. So the second set of innovations that I want to highlight, so remember moving along towards the next component in that resilience framework. So this is innovation for information. Innovation to close the information gap and enable its access and use. And the first of those innovations that I want to highlight is on the left-hand side of the slide that you're looking at. So this is what we call DIWASA. This is a program that we've run at IMI for the last several years. DIWASA is Digital Innovation for a Water Secure Africa. This is water information for Africa, drawing together Earth observation historically, and then the innovation, the development of different ways of using and applying Earth observation data to help deliver water information for Africa. Linking that to hydrological modeling to show freshwater variability across Africa, water accounting for assessing availability, usage, and allocation potential, whether that's at the level of an irrigation scheme, the level of a country, the level of a basin, or indeed across the whole continent. And then applications, for example, to drought monitoring, to flood forecasting, and so on. But this is complemented by end user, what we term end user co-design of the tools, and then skills development with end users. So linking to that learning component that I mentioned earlier. On the right side of the slide, I want to highlight a second innovation, and this is something very, very new that we're working on at IMI. We're doing this alongside the Limpopo Basin Commission, LIMCOM, and it's development of a digital twin for the Limpopo Basin in southern Africa. So a digital rendition of the physical basin. This is, and you get a little picture of it in the animation that's on the screen, or it was working before, it seems to have stopped. So this is a 3D AI-powered platform that integrates different kinds of data and data sets, whether from satellite data, Internet of Things sensors, also citizen science, can bring that into one platform, one means of analyzing these kinds of data. So enabling us to monitor and forecast water availability, environmental flows, drought risks, etc. for the basin. Plus, with this system, it includes an AI virtual assistant that translates what can be very complex information, complex science, into accessible insights that decision makers can make direct use of. So this is quite a pioneering innovation that we're working on alongside LIMCOM, the Limpopo Basin Commission, providing almost real-time data to bridge that critical information gap for better and more timely decision-making on water management. For example, regional responses to water scarcity to enhance resilience, as we're focused on today. The next innovation that I want to highlight relates to infrastructure, so the infrastructure and component of that framework. And there are many dimensions to this, but what I want to feature here are innovations related to wastewater recycling and reuse. So important, of course, in water-scarce regions for reducing pressures on freshwater resources, enhancing access, and reducing vulnerability to scarcity. And in particular, a project called e-Rewater. This is a project that's working here in the MENA region and also now in Mexico. It's funded by Google.org. It's building a tool to generate spatially explicit and high-resolution data for present scenarios as well as future scenarios on wastewater availability, and then matching this to potential demand across different sectors. It's powered by artificial intelligence, also integrating Earth observation and different kinds of data analytics. And what it does, it analyzes the potential to recover wastewater that is otherwise lost, and then reuse that in different sectors. The results are then summarized into a water reuse dashboard, and this is where its application becomes very interesting. So that dashboard is then accessible, can be used by utility engineers, entrepreneurs, policymakers to then select where and the investments they wish to make in water reuse projects, even in areas where data is currently scarce or even unavailable. So the aim here is that with this kind of tool, these kinds of data, we can give a major boost to efforts to accelerate the expansion of water reuse in the MENA region and other dry regions around the world. So back to the point about self-organization. So this is, as I said before, this is so important because communities are more resilient to shocks and stresses when they can self-organize to respond. Farmer-led irrigation is one model for irrigation development expansion where farmers themselves drive the design and investment. So it's their self-organization that's driving the design and investment in irrigation. And the key is then that irrigation development is locally relevant and aligned to market conditions and market drivers. So it's farmer-led, but not in isolation. So we at IMI and the partners that we work with, we are working on innovations relating to the financing mechanisms that help to empower this process, as well as the means of those farmers managing risks. So innovations that also strengthen the entire ecosystem in which farmers develop their irrigation. So for example, blended financing mechanisms to lower the upfront investment costs and spread repayment rates and better manage risks. Alongside that, innovative mechanisms in the case of solar-powered irrigation, innovative mechanisms for using carbon credits in farmer-led irrigation. Flexible financing to cater for different segments of farmer groups based on land size, for example, or gender, to help make sure that investments are made in risk appropriate for these groups. Also innovation, linking this to innovation of irrigation as a service to overcome some of the constraints that farmer-led irrigation faces around ownership because of risk, and then innovation related to that entire ecosystem for farmer-led irrigation that I referred to. So strengthening of value chains, capacity strengthening, not just for the farmers, but also for the irrigation supply and service providers, for the financing institutions that they're working with the agro dealers and so on. And then also private sector partnerships and innovation hubs to help that ecosystem move forward with developing and scaling farmer-led innovations around irrigation. Okay, so those are 4 innovations that we're working on to help build resilience. So the key here, and there's many such innovations that we could mention, and I'm sure many could mention that align to these components. So the key thing to keep in mind, though, is that when we work on resilience, we have to work and think in a systems way and align these types of innovations across this kind of framework that brings these different components and threads them together into systems change that reinforces resilience. So bundling packages together of the kinds of innovations that I've outlined this morning. So let me leave you with that, and thank you very much, and back to you, Yusuf.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much, Dr. Mark Smith, for your interesting presentation and, more importantly, interesting thoughts and insights. I liked the framework that you presented and the 4 components. They are very important, obviously, for building resilience. And also, thank you for taking us through what IMI is doing to leverage on data to enable participative governance, but also to fill the gap in terms of knowledge and also guide investments, for example, in the Erie Water project to guide when you are guiding the investments in terms of wastewater treatment and reuse in MENA. Thank you very much. I'm sure there will be more questions. There will be questions for you. And now we will go to our sister organization within the CGR family, to ICARDA, to learn about ICARDA's vision when it comes to building resilience in very special ecosystem and agroecological zone, which is the drylands. So this will be possible with the speech of Dr. Vinay Nangia. So Dr. Vinay is the research program leader in soil, water, and agronomy at ICARDA. He is a visiting professor at Tatur University in Japan and adjunct faculty at Texas E&M University. Dr. Vinay holds a PhD degree in water resources science and 2 master's degree, all from the University of Minnesota in US. He led many international projects in water resources management and climate change. He published over 300 publications, and he is a recipient of several scientific awards and honors. Dr. Vinay, the stage is yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Yusuf. And it's difficult to follow Mark and say something interesting that is yet to be said. So my intervention will be focusing only on dry areas. ICARDA, International Center for Agricultural Research in the Dry Areas, is a premier research organization specializing in dryland agriculture. We are the only CGR center headquartered in the MENA region. We have been here since 1977. So we have a long history of partnerships and innovations and successes that have been possible in partnership with all of you present here and beyond. So dry areas, just for your information, have about 30% of the global human population. They hold about 44% of the land area, and they also support 50% of the livestock. Yet, drylands have only 8% of the global water resources. So you see how much pressure we are putting on land and water resources, trying to support so many human beings and livestock with so little good quality fertile land, as well as the limited water resources that we have available. Also, because of these pressures of severe climatic conditions, limited resources, the dry areas are losing about 23 hectares per minute to desertification because of inability to manage these land resources, but also because of poor management decisions that the farmers are making. A farmer is really poor and very marginalized in this part of the world. A farmer earns only 6 cents for $1 worth of food that he produces. So you see how unable he is, how difficult it is for a farmer to invest in innovations and science, because his profit margins are so small. He's just living one crop to the next. And it's very difficult to create something for him that he can take up with very little support, whether it's knowledge, whether it's financial support. But that's the challenge that we at ICARDA are dealing with. At the same time, the region consumes almost 85% of freshwater resources for agriculture, yet there are countries that are 50 to 90% food insecure. You're using so much of water, and yet you're not able to produce enough to feed the people. I used to live in a country, Jordan, that consumes almost 85% of water resources to produce food to feed itself for only 18 days a year. Imagine 85% of your water going to agriculture, yet you're producing enough to feed yourself for only 18 days a year. That equation is just not acceptable in 21st century. We have to think of business unusual. What we have been doing hasn't worked till now, so what can we do about it? ICARDA has recently launched its 2030 research and innovation strategy, where we are trying to redouble our efforts on stuff that we have been doing for all these decades, but also trying to bring in new science that is contextualized to the local situation, local context, and make it affordable, and it can be taken up by the local farmers. I'll just touch upon a few things, not to be doing something that EME is trying to do, but try to to give you examples of stuff that is quite different. For example, we are trying to move into neglected and underutilized crops, opportunity crops. These are the indigenous crops that used to grow in this part of the world, because agriculture started in this part of the world, and there are so many crops, there are so many varieties that are climate resilient, that are drought tolerant, that can survive in these harsh conditions that we have stopped growing, and we are trying to bring those back. So neglected, underutilized crops that can withstand harsh conditions are good for the environment, good for human consumption. We're trying to bring them back into the cropping system. Second thing we're trying to do, especially here in Egypt, is that we consume a lot of wheat-based bread every day. How we can replace some of that wheat with barley, which can require a lot less water, which can survive in a lot harsh conditions. And we're trying to work with the nutrition department here in Egypt to replace 5, 10, 15, 20% of the wheat with barley, so that the environmental stress reduces in production of this bread. We are also working towards alternative plant-based proteins. Instead of eating water-guzzling beef and chicken and other kinds of meat, how we can substitute it with faba bean, with chickpea, with lentils, with other kinds of commodities that require a lot less pressure, grow in a very short window, 60, 70 days of growing season, you can have these kind of food legumes grown, and how you can bring that into your diets. How can we influence the diets of the drylands of the MENA region so that the environmental pressure, the water pressure reduces? Another thing that we are working on are green energy solutions. One difficulty that we have working with the farmers in this part of the world is that they are not connected to the grid. They don't have access to the electricity. And many times the farmers are unable to adopt water-saving technologies just because they don't have access to electricity. So how can you bring some green energy solution now that solar power has become so much affordable? So for instance, we in partnership with MIT are trying to introduce solar-powered desalination of brackish groundwater. There are farmers who are inland who don't need to desalinate seawater. It's just the brackish groundwater that they want to desalinate to make it usable for agriculture purposes. How you can bring solar technology, because the level of salinity is not as high as saline water you find in the oceans. How can you clean this water and make it available for agriculture purposes? You're not trying to make it drinkable, potable kind of a water. So that way we are trying to bring in innovations that are green energy solutions. We are also working on agrovoltaics, how you can have solar panels and in the shade you can grow some shade-loving crops, aromatic plants, herbs, vegetables, and you can have an integration of crops and livestock coexisting, and at the same time you're producing electricity. So when you don't need this electricity, you can sell that electricity and have electricity as a harvest. Instead of crop, you're harvesting electricity. So agrovoltaics is another thing that we are trying to move towards. At the same time, we are also in partnership with MIT talking about ultra-low energy drip irrigation systems. Drip irrigation usually works at about 1 bar pressure, if you see. But with MIT, we have introduced a new kind of drippers that require 85% lower activation pressure. When you need such low pressure, you can get away with a small pump and a few solar panels, and the upfront cost of drip irrigation goes down significantly. So a small farmer, a marginal farmer who was growing rain-fed barley or wheat can now think of having solar-powered, ultra-low energy drip irrigation systems to grow some cash crops. We are also trying this in the GCC countries, trying to have root zone cooling. What we have discovered is that you don't have to cool down the whole greenhouse. All you need is to apply cold water to the roots of the plants. So in the hydroponic systems in the GCC countries like Saudi Arabia and UAE and other places, we have introduced solar-powered root zone cooling system that has reduced the energy requirement and the water requirement by 80 to 90%. So there are so many innovations we are trying to bring, contextualize, and try to make it available to the smallholder farmers that can be affordable. One last thing I want to touch upon is the digitalization. It could be the next revolution in the field of agriculture. What we are trying to do is embrace digital technology, but for the sake of the end user, the farmer. Instead of extension agent giving you advice, how we can take an app, how can we take a dashboard and help the farmer make informed decisions by near real-time information. We are harnessing big data, artificial intelligence, machine learning, and all kinds of new stuff that's happening, but trying to simplify it for a farmer. Try to do a weather forecast for the farmer. Try to tell the farmer when to plant, when to fertilize, how much yield to expect, how much is your yield, how much is the potential yield. So we are trying to bring all these scientific innovations and trying to make the life easier and de-risk agriculture for the smallholder farmers of the dry lands. So this is something we are trying to aspire to do in our new strategy, which we introduced very recently. And by 2030, we have very ambitious targets that we are planning to achieve. And we invite you all to join us in this journey and make this a success for the dryland farmers of the MENA region. Thank you so much, Yusuf, and thank you, Amy. Yep.
Thank you, Vinay, for the interesting speech and the interesting way that ICARDA is considering to bring resilience to this very interesting context, dry lands or dry areas, but especially under the very interesting social and economic features of this region that need to be definitely taken into consideration when resilience options are designed and implemented. Thank you very much. I'm sure there will be similarly a lot of questions in the Q&A session. So please, audience, take note of your questions. There will be, of course, an opportunity to continue this discussion with our distinguished speakers after the last presentation or speech. But now we will talk about a very important component in the resilience building process, human factor, people. And to go through this topic, our distinguished speaker will be talking about his experience. He is a multidisciplinary water and sustainable development specialist with qualification in science and natural resources law and 30 years of experience in water, fisheries, and agriculture governance, policy, strategy, resource allocation, stakeholder engagement, research, education, and advocacy. He has designed and delivered water education for participants from 70 countries and is co-founder and co-editor-in-chief of World Water Policy Journal, a platform to support the world's emerging water leaders and thinkers. Currently, he is an adjunct professor in water resource management and global consultant. I'm talking about Jeff Kamkin. Please, the stage is yours. Under your applause, please.
Okay, thanks very much. It's a huge pleasure to be here and to speak with you today. I'm representing World Water Policy Journal, but also a bunch of other affiliations, including University of Western Australia. Yeah, this is a great pleasure. I was here 13 years ago at a irrigation water use efficiency workshop in Cairo, and it's fantastic to see the progress that has been made since then. I'll be presenting just a few of my personal learnings from 30 years in natural resource management, focusing on the need for investment in community engagement and capacity building. So let's get into it. The top button? Yeah. So water has been a common thread throughout my career. Over that 30 years, I've been involved in a whole range of different sorts of community consultation engagement programs. I've over-consulted, I've under-consulted, and I've avoided consultation. And I've learnt from each of those, because I've had some successes, but I've also had quite a few failures. And More recently, I've designed and run new water courses for students from over 70 different countries. So I'll share 3 quick interconnected stories that I think demonstrate some of the lessons I took from those experiences. Well, this is a graph of the stream flows into Perth, Western Australia storage dams over about the last 100 years. Starts off in about 1910. You can see very high peaks. You can see the green line is a long-term average, and then you see this step down towards the right-hand side of the slide from your perspective, and that was the early 2000s. At that time, I was the manager of water allocation, so it was my job to decide how much water is available and who gets it. Note the step downs in that inflow over time. So it was a pretty challenging period, but it's a period where we accepted that this is climate change. We're going to have to deal with this situation now on the right-hand side of that slide. In fact, since then, the water dropped down further. There's been a couple of wet years, but the water supplier now plans for 0 surface water into Perth's water supply as a result of climate change. Any surface water is a bonus. We weren't prepared for that. We lost many appeals against my decisions. So I took off on a series of national and international study tours to see how it was being done better elsewhere. Then around 2002, during that period, water became the #1 political issue for Western Australia in the government's polling of what's important to the people. So the Premier took responsibility for water and said, "This is mine. I am now the Minister for Water Resources." The Premier did a lot of things. One of them, I think, was an incredibly interesting initiative that came from Canada, and it was the Premier's Water Symposium. He established an event for 3 days in the lower house of Parliament where 100 members of the community sat in the chairs of decision makers and debated what to do about the water crisis. Now, 1/3 of those people were people like myself that had some expertise in water. 1/3 of them were from smaller local events around the state, and 1/3 of them were randomly selected from the electoral roll and invited. It was an incredible experience for these people to be sitting there in those chairs and having a say. And it really, that and a number of other things the Premier did, Dr. Jeff Gallup, really showed the importance of champions across all walks of society in solving problems. And in particular, it highlighted the importance of a political champion. It also highlighted to me that we never should waste a good crisis, and I'll come back to that in a minute. But it led to a symposium, led to a state water strategy, then to an irrigation review, and then a complete review of water governance. Because I'd done my homework in these international study tours, the Premier invited me to undertake that water governance review with one colleague. So it was my opportunity to have some influence at that level. I got to tell the Premier some stories from an international study. One of them was about my participation in the inauguration of the Inkamati Catchment Management Agency in South Africa. And at that meeting, I told the Premier this story, that at that meeting, I spoke with a farmer who explained to me the purpose of that meeting, of the inauguration of the CMA. He explained to me the role of the CMA in implementing the National Water Resources Strategy. He explained to me what the Water Resources Strategy was all about and how it was implementing the Water Act. He explained to me how the Water Act was based on 27 principles of water resource management in South Africa, and how those principles were coming from a white paper and aimed to implement the post-apartheid reforms in South Africa. Now, that was an incredible thread for someone at a meeting to be able to explain. And that and other stories and other things the Premier came across, it was a very visible shift in the way he was looking at water from a political football, something to take short wins from, to a legacy issue that he wanted to leave a good legacy for Western Australia for 50 years. And it was an impressive change. It resulted in a wide range of changes, including legislative reform, a new water department, etc. But the window of opportunity closed fast. The Premier suffered from an illness. He left the Premiership, and with him went a lot of that history and that emotion of going through that time of change. Now, 20 years later, the legislation has still not been reformed. It was the highest priority of government 20 years ago, and it still hasn't been reformed because it's no longer the priority, because the people who went through that experience are no longer there. But Western Australia will go through that experience again. Now, the lesson for me was that there are opportunities for real change, but they're rare. And so we need to be prepared, and we need to learn from wherever we can to be prepared for those situations. The next story is about Northern Australia. It's a very special place with wild rivers, wildlife, and wild ideas for its development. But there are also very important and very special Indigenous and non-Indigenous values associated with how it is right now. Through the Northern Australia Irrigation Futures Project, which is a collaboration of CSIRO, the Cooperative Research Centre for Irrigation Futures, and all the governments across Northern Australia, we investigated the future of irrigation in the north. Now, I've only got time to focus on one aspect of that, and that is the role of social learning in dealing with complexity and uncertainty. So part of the project, we reflected on my past experiences as the manager of water allocation, and we examined the complexity involved in water management. From just 12 plans and large water allocation decisions, we identified more than 300 different factors that someone somewhere had taken into account. 300 different social, economic, environmental and external factors that have been considered in decisions. And that raised one really crucial question, and it's also explained why I couldn't sleep at night, was how can we possibly deal with that level of complexity? We drew some inspiration from Sriskandarajah from 1991 when he said, sustainability is better seen as a measure of the relationship between the community as learners rather than an external design goal to be achieved. Goes back to what Mark was saying. And we drew on that, and I guess one of the most important messages I think we added from our work was that dealing with complexity, uncertainty and risk is a shared need and responsibility for governments and communities, highlighting the importance of mutual learning and shared knowledge. But our ability to achieve a more sustainable future or more resilient communities is only as strong as the weakest link. We need to build the capacity of all actors, including the NGOs that monitor and report on decision makers and their decisions. And we need to invest in all forms of education and training. I've delivered master and trade water education for participants from over 70 countries, and there's one very clear message that comes from that. Peer learning, or rather peer-to-peer learning, is the most appreciated form of knowledge sharing. Peer-to-peer learning. And the same goes for the farmers and the fishermen and the communities that I've had the pleasure of working with over those 30 years. Peer-to-peer learning. So one final thought on the role we all play. All of us are involved in data management, research projects, or policy development, or project implementation, and a whole lot of other steps. And they're all really important, and all of us have an important play in water management. But all those roles and all those contributions are just part of the bigger story. And what really matters is that we are combining our efforts and developing our collective wisdom. Because it's the collective wisdom that we develop that'll get us through the critical challenges that we have ahead. So, thank you very much. I appreciate the opportunity to be here, Yusuf, and all the organisers, and thank you all. Have a good day.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Professor Jeff. really inspiring words, insights, and learnings from experience. I was really amazed by the number of factors that have been identified in this interesting exercise, 300 factors. It's really striking number about how complex is the water system and the aspect that you focused on, irrigation, water allocation, etc. Really interesting. And I liked also your final words. They need to focus on collective wisdom for, if you may allow me, for inclusive resilience, which is the key word of this session. Thank you very much, and I look forward to more elaboration, more discussion with you in the Q&A session. But now we will go to my former colleague, Stefan Ollerbrook. So Stefan is, his main expertise includes water management in changing climate, hydrological processes and modeling across scales, and the water energy food ecosystem nexus. So he is a renowned academic and has led and contributed to many projects in Africa, Asia, Europe, and MENA that have demonstrated the impact of global changes and climate change on water. He is experienced in translating scientific knowledge to effective policies, strategies, and services that contribute to the environmental and economic societal sustainability. Since September 2022, Stephen leads the hydrology, water, and cryosphere branch of the World Meteorological Organization, WMO, the UN Specialized Agency for Weather, Climate, and Water. Previously, he served as the Director of Water, Food, and Ecosystems at the International Water Management Institute, IMI. He also served in very senior positions with UNESCO program. He has been also full professor in Dutch universities, including IHE Delft. He did his PhD and habilitation at the University of Freiburg in Germany. Professor Stefan, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you, Yusuf. Colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, pleasure to say a few words. This session is mainly about innovation and also about building resilience. Building resilience really requires good data, good understanding of the water resources. So in this presentation, I would like to give a little bit of an overview of a report we just published last Monday. It was launched last Monday, and it gives an overview about the global water resources. And how do I manipulate the slides here? Because often, you know, even if there's tension around water resources, it's often because we don't have the same agreement. How much water do we have at this moment, and how will it likely develop in the coming weeks or months, or kind of a hydrological outlook? And at the World Meteorological Organization, we synthesize a lot of data, bring this together, and in a standardized way, we assess that to inform policy and decision-making processes. And I believe also this is an important basis for developing innovations. In many countries, we used to print the kind of hydrological yearbook. You might remember that. And then, of course, nowadays we don't print anymore, but we have it digital. But that's the same what we are doing with the Global State of Water Resources report. We publish just now the third version. So at an annual scale, we synthesize all the data that we can access and do a quantitative assessment of the water resources. The difference to many other analysis of global models or so, I think here we always use the data that really comes from the country. So as much as we can, we base it on measurements. And the second is, I show some global model results as well, and I'm sure you have many seen global world maps color-coded into yellow and green and whatever. What we show here is kind of the best globally operational hydrological models synthesized together in an ensemble prediction. So to make it as robust as possible, it's not just one model, it's synthesizing the global best 10 models that are out there for operational hydrology. So therefore, we believe this is a relatively sound basis for assessing water resources. My second point is on data sharing. It's, often from the UN we publish lots of reports, and it's not just, yet another report, but doing a report is part of the objective. When we did this, I still remember the first report we launched end of 2022, we had a much weaker database. And over the last 2 years, countries increasingly shared data. So now we had more than 36,000 groundwater levels, for instance, which we could analyze. So producing reports, and countries find that then interesting to contribute to this. Producing the report is kind of also giving an account of how much data do we have, and it's also a trigger for countries sharing more and more. WMO very much stands for we call that the unified data policy, where we want to make whatever is possible available. And we fully understand the sensitivities around the water data, much easier in meteorological data. But bringing these reports together is also a means to the objective of sharing more data. Maybe that's what I wanted to say here. Let's oops, wrong direction. Well, we have many different chapters in this. Oh, how do I? There should be some circles flying in. Oops. Oh my God. Sorry, this is a very old version of the PowerPoint. 3-4 days ago, I shared an updated version. Okay, I do my best. Well, what I else wanted to say, whenever we had 30 years of consistent data, we compared the year, for instance, the year 2023 and the groundwater levels in the year 2023, or the stream flow, etc., with the previous years of 30 years of data. For groundwater, we not always had 30 years of data. Sometimes we had to work with 20 years. But same is true for snow and ice and for all the other parameters. What you see in this figure, we analyze all the different water components. What I will keep it today is to look at this river discharge as well as inflow into reservoirs. Yusuf gave me only 10 minutes, and to present all the results, I probably would need a bit of more time. So I'm continuing with this PowerPoint. What you see here, colleagues, you might be familiar with the climate temperature stripes, you know, that every year got a certain temperature, and we did the same for water resources. Here, every year is one column in this figure, and since more than 30 years, we had consistent stream flow data. In the middle is the part where the river basins around the world behave normal, so that means they are plotting between the 25 and 75% quantile. When they're above the 75% quantile, we call them, it's a wetter than normal year. If below, it's drier than normal. And what you see here, over the last 5 years in particular, the amount of river basins around the world that behaved normal became less and less. And particularly 2023 was almost half of the planet, so all river basins, the area of all the river basins of the world, almost half of it is abnormal. So it's either much too dry or wetter than normal. And what we saw in particular in 2023, it was as dry as never when it comes to rivers, to river flow. The stream flow was globally seen, on average, never as dry as before. And this is interesting because 2023, you might remember that we also broke all the temperature records. Every month was yet the warmest month on record, and that continued into 2024. But in 2023, the warmest year on record, so this energy, this heat, translated into dry rivers. Yeah, and this is all summarized in one single figure, so therefore it's a very condensed data set, but 2023 was really an exceptional year. When we come to river discharge, what you see here is the point data of data that was available in 2023. It's some 54 countries globally shared either streamflow or groundwater or other data sets. What I show this figure, it's not easy to interpret because the color coding of the different dots indicates which river gauging station is above or below normal. But I think what is interesting to see the unequal distribution. We hardly got data from Africa. We also we have big gaps in Asia and parts of Latin America, but we have a better coverage in parts of Europe as well as in North America. Now, because of that unequal distribution, we use the best 10 operational hydrological models that are out there. We brought them together in a standardized ensemble setup and analyzed the streamflow data. Now let's look quickly at 2022, the previous year. And what we see there is a global map of color-coded the streamflow conditions in the different river basins around the world. And I would like to draw your attention to the southwest of the United States, the Colorado River. It was a drought there for some 10 years almost. It's very much below streamflow conditions. They were suffering from that with significant implications for farmers and downstream water users in California. And that was the situation in 2022. Or look at the Greater Horn of Africa, the area Somalia, Ethiopia. It was also at least a 5-year drought period where the streamflow records were significantly below normal. While in the southwest of Australia, this is for Jeff, we had quite wet conditions in the year 2022. 2022 was a year that was strongly characterized by a La Nina situation. And during the year of 2023, the system swapped. So in July, roughly, we had a switch from a La Nina condition to El Nino condition. And it's interesting how these global circulation in the climate system, how they translate to streamflow. And now you have the analysis of the streamflow records for 2023, and you see in the Pacific Southwest in the United States, from this super dry conditions, this turned into wet conditions. If I would show you more data we have on snow, you would see there was snow records in the Rocky Mountains in that part of the world, which then in the coming summer melted and became water resources, and you see the drought, for more than 10 years drought, really was ended by this record snowfall and much wetter conditions. Or look at the region of the Greater Horn of Africa, which was also a pronounced drought for a number of years, and we now observed in 2023 much wetter conditions, and which is triggered by El Nino signal as well as the Indian Ocean dipole, which influences circulation patterns. And the and the southeast of Australia became much more a normal, bit wetter year, but not as wet as it was before. I'm very curious which slide comes now. This is because this is really an outdated PowerPoint presentation, which I shared more than a year ago, but what we see here is the inflow into reservoirs. So the change in the river flows is then also marked as the much below inflow into many reservoirs around the world. And the bigger the dot, the larger the volume of the reservoir, and the color coding again suggests which reservoirs receive normal inflow during the year or below and above. Last point I wanted to make in terms of data, you see this very unequal distribution of streamflow data. Yes, there's many more streamflow data sets around the world, but for one of the other reasons, countries couldn't make them available to us. So therefore, I would like to encourage you also sharing with us data in time that we're able to incorporate more, that all these global model results are validated better. All the models were calibrated on 30 years of data, so we have much more data, which I don't show today. But for the year of 2022, we had stations, 2023, we had operational discharge data from these stations. However, there's interesting innovations going on. Based on the latest high accuracy altimetry data, we got another 1,400 discharge stations around the world. This is satellite data where they, in a very precise way, can observe the stream flow because of this high precision altimetry. And based on a rating curve which was developed over the past, they can approximate river discharge. So you see much more data can be available. Countries didn't clear this yet for us to utilize it, but in theory we have many more soon when countries agree to the approach. We have much more data available which help us to get a better handle on the water resources in the future. A big thank you to all the contributors. The WMO compiled the work of quite a number of global data centers, modeling centers around the world, and a big thank you to them. And so you see this is really the draft presentation which we share here today. Let me briefly go through my 5 key messages for today. The first point, 2023 was really the driest year for more than 3 decades when it comes to global streamflow. Yeah. Second point I want to make, over the last 5 years, so the amount of river basins that behave normal, so that they are in the beige part, which I indicated before, getting less and less, and particularly 2023 was the driest year on record, which coincides also with the warmest year on record. So it will be exciting to analyze the 2024 data, because the global temperature records up to August 2024 were always broken. There was always yet another July, August, etc. Around the year. Which I showed you today a lot of mean streamflow data, and if we have that half of the planet roughly was under much drier than normal conditions, it doesn't mean there's no floods. So what we actually observe, I didn't show much data today, what we observe is in many countries we still have a lot of flooding, which is linked to the warm atmosphere, which is linked to warm oceans, and then also more dynamics in the evaporation and cloud formation process. And a warmer atmosphere can also hold more water. So therefore, when it rains, we observe then stronger rainfall intensities and therefore more flooding. In 2023, we had, for instance, the major flooding in Libya, which was dramatic, some 400 millimeters of rainfall, which led to the collapse of 2 dams and a disaster for the downstream people. So what I wanted to say is what our data suggests, it's becoming more extreme, so we have more pronounced, larger areas under dry conditions, while at the same time we observe more devastating floods. Maybe the last point from this draft presentation, the 2023 report really benefited from data sharing. It was great to see over the last 3 years how more and more countries shared their data. If I may call for more collaboration, and even if you're the head of the hydrological survey in your country, please help us in increasing the evidence base of these type of reports, increasing the evidence base of all the global models we see in many of the conference presentations here. And also more innovations like this precision altimetry helps us to get better insights into water resources. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Stefan, for taking us through this very interesting knowledge product that is actually capturing the importance of data. Data is really key, and I thank you for recalling the importance of data and the need for monitoring systems on the ground, because we can't manage something that we don't know. Speaking about the water system, but other systems as well, and of course we have the Earth observation technologies, but ground monitoring is really important. Thank you very much again. The last speech in this high-level panel will be delivered by Mr. Alessandro Fracassetti. So Mr. Alessandro is the UNDP resident representative in the Republic of Egypt. So over the last 3 decades, Mr. Fracassetti has held senior management roles at UNDP and other international organizations across several countries in Eastern Europe, the Caucasian region, former Yugoslavia, and the Middle East. Mr. Alessandro, the stage is yours.
Good morning, and well, what more can we say in this panel after such distinguished colleagues have really gone really into much details about the water issue globally. Perhaps the angle we can take from here, from Egypt, is the regional angle. Is really to look at how some of these issues impact the region. We know that 80% of the impacts of climate change globally are water-related. That ranges from extreme floods, droughts, melting glaciers, rising sea levels, threatening global ecosystems. Now, climate change worsens the long-standing water crisis in the Arab region. 14 of the 20 most water-scarce countries are in this region. Currently, over 40% of the population faces more frequent and severe droughts and other climate-induced disasters. By 2050, climate-related water scarcity could lead to economic losses of the 14% of the regional GDP. Despite the critical demand for water, this sector remains underfunded and underinvested. Less than 10% of global financial flows go into infrastructure. the financial flows into infrastructures go towards water. Now, the good news is that these countries, starting from Egypt, have prioritized water management. 80% of the national determined contributions, the NDC, are towards the enhancement processes and are about climate resilience, water resource management. And 70% focus on climate resilient water systems and infrastructures. So the needs are huge. The planning is acknowledging the state of the situation and the large impact, but really more needs to be done on technology development. Current water technologies are still modest. There are few innovations, but many are energy intensive and raise environmental concerns. Now, water, as many of the SDG issues, should not be taken in isolation. It's important to go very much into details about the state of this challenge, but it's very important to look at how a lot of this impacts across the development sectors through many areas. We must increase the water supply in Arab states to ensure long-term peace and security, for example. This is a region, I don't have to tell you, that is plagued by issue of peace and security. And therefore, this requires new solutions for unconventional water resources and better demand-side management. While some technologies have limitations, these challenges can be addressed through ongoing development, research. Financial inflows need to grow to support those. Successively developing and scaling innovative water management technologies will require, of course, strong partnerships and large-scale financing to change the global market. You might have been in the room when the Minister of Water of Egypt has mentioned the AWARE project. This is a project we support, like many others in the UN system, and our water portfolio addresses water management challenges through three lenses: water for nature and development, water for climate resilience, and water for peace and security. As I said, in Egypt, we're proud to have supported the COP27 presidency a couple of years ago, among other things, in launching the AWARE initiative, Action on Aware Adaptation and Resilience. And AWARE fosters inclusive cooperation on water globally as a key element of climate change adaptation. One of its financial mechanisms focuses on improving low-cost water supply solutions. Beyond these programmatic benefits, AWARE aims to catalyze global cooperation to address the global water food crisis aggravated by climate change. Ladies and gentlemen, perhaps the one area that I would like to conclude on and address, perhaps has been addressed a bit less in this panel, is the issue of financing. In a way, delivering solution is what our business is, but often this is not enough. And in this issue, and in this key issue, existential one, a transactional approach will not suffice. One of the key challenges in the region is ensuring access to affordable climate change adaptation technologies. And collective efforts are needed to reduce the costs of these technologies, enabling farmers, for example, to adopt alternative water resource systems and sustainable agricultural practices that produce more with less fresh water. The good news, if we want to see it like that, is that the world does not lack the necessary capital to finance the course correction we need. The global financial system sits on an estimated 300 trillion in assets. However, we face challenge in effectively channeling this capital towards climate change, towards also the debt issue that many regional countries have, and of course in adaptation technologies and investments in this case. What we need, seems to me, is innovative finance that can unlock and catalyze resources for promising technologies and projects. We know what these solutions are: blended finance, digital finance, insurance products, performance-based grants, and improved alignment between domestic and international climate finance. Developing the right policies and regulations for green finance, coupled with promoting sustainable economic growth through green technology, is critical for a seamless green transition. And financial solutions must be executed in a way that does not exacerbate debt issues. According to the UNCTAD, UNCTAD, 70% of public climate finance is in the form of debt, and it primarily goes towards mitigation. Now it's a very important point for us. We must leverage financial innovation to support both mitigation, but also what is really the biggest issue for many of the countries where we are here now, which is adapting to a damage already done, and to adaptation efforts, therefore, to ensure at the same time sustainable growth. To scale up climate finance for resilience, we must help these countries in the region to establish new policies and institutions that de-risk private investments, to advance strategies such as climate debt swaps and payments for ecosystem services, provide access to cutting-edge climate adaptation technologies, promote synergies between grants and concessional lending, and ensure that climate finance reaches the most vulnerable communities. That's what we are trying to do here in Egypt and in many of the countries of the regions. We're committed to align climate and development financing for water security with the needs of our partner governments there. We cannot do this alone, and partnership will be essential to our success. I'm certainly encouraged by the wide range of partners that are at this event, and together we can hopefully ensure that the region is better equipped to face the challenges of water security and climate change adaptation. I thank you.
Thank you, Alessandro. Really, this is the best way to close the round of speeches and presentation, a regional and Egypt perspective on the opportunities for more innovations, and thank you for zooming on the opportunities for financial innovations to contribute to the resilience building in our context, and especially how to direct the interest of capitals on adaptation and resilience is really important in what is needed now, and I appreciate and we appreciate UNDP contribution in this area. Thank you very much. We probably exceeded the normal time for this session, but we definitely need to take benefits from these 10 distinguished panelists to probably discuss more, but in very, very brief way. So I will open the possibility for questions from the audience to our panelists. I will ask the persons who will be asking questions to introduce themselves quickly, please, and to be brief, so we can take benefit from these few minutes. Thank you.
My name is Dr. Mohamed Sharawi, Minister of Water Resources and Irrigation in Egypt. It seems that, thank you for this heavy amount of information, but it seems that in our race to resolve the water issues in Egypt and in other regions in the world, it seems that we always come in the second and third place. The complexity increases, the difficulties increases as long as we give more research and science and data acquisition and finance and investment innovations. It seems that something still for us and other regions didn't make us succeed in this race and take the first position. So I want to ask, what is the key things that we can start to, or when we can win this race? We have the SDGs 2030. I think that we will not be there, maybe 2050, or we can think in 2050 now, but we need to have a time frame that we, as a world, can succeed in this water security issue. Thank you.
Thank you, Doctor. And your question is for someone specific? Okay, General, perfect. Let me see if we have other questions, then we will be back to the panelists. Do you have other questions? Okay, while waiting, we can start with this question, and let me start with Dr. Mark Smith.
Thank you. Yeah, a very interesting question. How do we win the race? I have two comments on that. One is, and it was in part in the way that you framed the question, is institutions, and institutions that are agile and effective enough to and coordinated well enough, articulated well enough across different levels, different sectors, which is complex, to make change, to deliver change, to deliver change at the rates needed. So, one, institutions and all that goes around that is key. The second is, I think we need to think about what winning the race is. My own view is that water management will forever be messy. It's the nature of it because it's complex and it's full of unknowns. So the critical test needs to be, yes, are we moving fast enough and are we going, making progress in the right directions? But it will always be messy, is my view. Yeah, thanks.
Thank you, Mark. Vinay?
Is it on? Can you hear me? Okay. My take on it is that do we really need more science, or do we need to work on the science of scaling? There is like water cuts across so many different sectors and industries and ministries. Ministry of Agriculture, Ministry of Water, Ministry of Environment, Ministry of Energy. There are so many parts of the puzzles that have to come together to offer a solution, end-to-end solution that a farmer can take it up. Like, you have lots of science happening, but it's not trickling down to the farmer's field yet. Probably the effort should be invested in tackling those bottlenecks of why is it that all the science exists, yet the farmer is unable to tap into it and access it. Is it the market? Is it the delivery system? Is it the extension services? Is it the training? What is it that's preventing this farmer from taking up all these innovations that we hear of in conferences and university theses and everywhere, yet the farmer is not able to benefit from it? I think the effort should be towards that, to bridging that divide. Thank you.
Thank you, Vinay. Your Honorable Minister, Anguilla. Your Honorable Minister, do you have any reflections? Or yes, please, so we can go. Yeah, please, Stefan.
Thank you for the comment or question. I think what we try to do in this very complex, often unknown systems which we need to maneuver and deliver the change in the right direction, as Mark called it, I think that's the right thing. But do we always know is it the right direction? When we make progress, is the progress sufficiently fast enough, or is it actually taking a turn somewhere? So therefore, what is usually called evidence-based policy making is so critical. So therefore, it's not science for the sake of science. It's really science with the right questions and adjusting wherever possible. This kind of monitoring, evaluation, learning cycle is so critical in this policy arena, as you outlined it, I believe. And therefore, what we try to do is standardize the right data to give us some handle are we moving in the right direction, and where do we need to accelerate? And therefore, more monitoring and unfortunately more technology, more investments is so critical, because it's, I think, in the first semester of every single management school around the world, we always hear this: you can't manage what you don't measure. So therefore, knowing where we are we going in the right direction, and how is that developing is so critical. Thank you.
Thank you, Stefan. Please, Professor Jeff.
Hello? Oh, sorry. I want to back up something that Mark said about it's messy. It is messy. And that reflection that I had on my role as manager of water allocation, which is just part of water management, but finding that there were 350 or so different factors that someone had taken into account was a really interesting signal of how messy it is and how complicated it is. And it was only after doing that I realised my job was not to find the end point. My job was to help manage the process in an ongoing way. So it's an ongoing process. And one thing that I think we should always remember is the rivers and the groundwater systems do absolutely fine when there's no people around. It's about people and their interaction with water and their environment that we're trying to manage and have better outcomes from. And people don't deal well with uncertainty. And we've got into this mindset that we have to provide people with certainty, or that we have to have certainty. We won't get certainty. What we need to have is greater ability to manage in uncertainty and to accept uncertainty and to learn to live with that. And for mine, anyway, I think that comes back to we need to be utilising all the available forms of knowledge and information that there are, and that, as Mark also said, communities, and that is why communities are more resilient when they design their adaptation systems themselves, because they have that knowledge, they have that wisdom from within themselves.
Brilliant. Thank you. Thank you very much, Professor Jeff. I'm really sorry we really went far in terms of time. I'm being indicated by the organizer that we definitely need to close. So I invite you to interact with the speakers, please, in the break. And the conversation will continue, obviously, through the subsequent session and other sessions in Cairo Water Week and Africa Water Week. I invite you to applaud our speakers for the knowledge they shared with us today, first. And I thank you for your interest into this on this session, and I thank the Ministry of Water Resources and Irrigation for the quality cooperation with the International Water Management Institute, IMI. Thank you very much.